Rabbi Alexander Grodensky was born in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, and grew up in the Russian North. In 2015, he graduated from Abraham Geiger College in Berlin-Potsdam with a rabbinic ordination, and from the University of Potsdam with a Master of Arts in Jewish Studies. Before joining Abraham Geiger College, he studied in Russia and Israel, and was also a fellow at PADEA, which is the European Institute for Jewish Studies in Stockholm. So with Jews in Luxembourg today, here is Rabbi Alexander Grodensky.
Thank you, Justin, for this introduction, and thank you in general that you have interest in such a special topic as Jewry of Luxembourg. Honestly, before I came here, I never really thought about Jews in Luxembourg. Obviously, Luxembourg is an important country in Europe, at least. But I came here 5 years ago, so I'm not Luxembourger, and but I'm let's say, a typical example of a Luxembourgish Jew. I will explain in a couple of minutes what I mean by that. But first of all, well, a little bit of fun. Maybe you know the previous president of the European Commission, and he was also Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Jean-Claude Juncker. He used to say there are two grand countries in Europe. One is Grand Britain, which is Great Britain, and another one is Grand Duchy, which is Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. And if you follow the news, we are now the only grand country in Europe. So you're now basically through this technology in the heart of Europe, in Luxembourg. And before we continue, the most important thing, especially for the Americans, to understand that Luxembourg is not part of Belgium. It's a sovereign state. Indeed, there is a province of Luxembourg with identical court of arms as Luxembourg, where we are now. But it's a province in Belgium, and it was seized from Luxembourg in the early 19th century, when Belgium was created as rebellious provinces of the Netherlands, and Luxembourg then lost the French-speaking part of the Grand Duchy. So, but this connection to Belgium and to the Netherlands is still very important nowadays. I mean, very often we use the term Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg as one block. And abroad, very often Belgian and Dutch embassies share responsibility in representing Luxembourg abroad. In the United States, there is a proper Luxembourgish embassy, but for example, in Israel, Belgian and Dutch, they share this responsibility. Justin already said, it's a very small country between Germany and France. Very dynamic country. We have about 600,000 residents here who live in Luxembourg, and every day about 200,000 people cross the border to work in Luxembourg. So Luxembourg is a kind of an economic engine of a region which is called Grand Region. There are parts of Germany, parts of France, and parts of Belgium connected in a cooperative agreements. And within this, so Luxembourg is sort of in the heart of this area, and the most dynamic and most wealthy part per capita. So we are the wealthiest country in the world, but per capita only. Yeah, so 50% of Luxembourgish residents are Luxembourgish citizens, so about half of the population are foreigners. And even the Luxembourgers, like by citizenship, they're very often Luxembourgers in the first generation. So it's a very diverse, multilingual, multicultural, and also multi-religious country. Justin already mentioned, we have 3 official languages: Luxembourgish, which is, I mean, political issue, whether dialect or language, but until 19 1884, Luxembourgish was understood as a dialect of German, but now Luxembourgish is a separate, independent language. Another language, official language, is French and German. So these three languages are official, and to be eligible to work in public service, you have to speak three languages. So it's a very difficult entry requirements. And kids who go to public schools, regular public schools, they start elementary school in Luxembourgish, then they change to German as a language of instruction, and then to French. And of course, on top of this, they have to learn English or any other extra language. So it's really very interesting here. When I came here, first thing you had to kind of realize what language you would talk to others. And the nice thing about Luxembourg is that since people are so multilingual, nobody speaks proper language. So if you speak with mistakes, or not really 100%, it's okay. I mean, everybody's kind of relaxed about it. And this situation, this position between big cultures, German and French, also taught Luxembourgers certain amount of pragmatism. Although there is a rise on nationalism in Europe, Luxembourg is still very far away from populist movements like in France or in Germany. And on top of these three languages, we have also very strong unofficial use of English and Portuguese, because there is a lot of Portuguese-speaking immigrants in Luxembourg who came after the Second World War to work here, because there were not enough people for the Luxembourg steel industry. So the beginning of the wealth of Luxembourg was not in banks and not in financial services industry, but in steel production. And where I am now, in Esch-sur-Alzette, is the second largest city of Luxembourg with a population of 36,000 people, which we call Southern Metropolis of Luxembourg. It was the heart of the industry, steel industry, until the 70s. So this sort of say this, and by the way, my community, since we are so international, we use English as a kind of working language that people more or less understand and can speak. Another important factor in Luxembourgish life is that it is Luxembourg City is one of the 4 capitals of the European Union. Other capitals are Brussels, Strasbourg, and Frankfurt am Main. And there are several important European institutions that are located in the city, in the city of Luxembourg. For example, the Court of Justice of the European Union. Maybe if you follow the news, we were recently very heavily in the news, in the Jewish news, because there was in December, there was a judgment of the European Court of Justice about ritual slaughter. If you're interested, I can make a couple of comments afterwards. There are also European Investment Bank and the European Stabilization Mechanism here. There are supporting agencies of the European Commission here, and also the translation agency that all documents of the European Union, they have to be translated in 24 official languages of the European Union. So 24 languages, you need a lot of people who can produce all this documentation in all these 24 languages. So that's why we also have a lot of people coming to Luxembourg to work for these institutions. And many of the Jews who come to Luxembourg, they are basically from the translation branch, so to say. We also have a lot of banks. This is the first maybe thing that people think about Luxembourg, or hedge funds and insurance companies. Amazon Europe sits here. Some chocolate companies sit here. So it's a very dynamic economic place, and that's why also people come here to study. There's usually a problem to find people than to find job in Luxembourg. So it's one. So this is the positive. Whether you like it positive, I don't know. It's a kind of a positive side of being in Luxembourg. It's very easy to integrate because it's such a international environment, and there is also a traditional attitude of Luxembourgers to be more accommodative and flexible to the foreigners because of the foreigners is all this wealth. Without foreigners, it will be not possible. But there are also, of course, the side effects of this. That means that very often you cannot really have long, stable relationships because people come and go. And for the Jewish community as well. That means that sometimes people come for 5 years, for 10 years, and then they have to leave because they change the jobs and so on. There are also not so many young adults here, because if you would like to study, so we have kind of high school population, and then there is a gap, and then there are people who are already in their early careers. So we don't really have a lot of Jewish students, because although we have since 2003 Luxembourg University, which is situated in my city, usually people go outside of this small country to explore, especially the young people, explore the world. And Luxembourg state is very generous in supporting Luxembourgish residents, not necessarily citizens, with scholarships to study in France, in Germany, in Belgium, also in the UK. So this is sort of say one of the factors that affect our Jewish life here. And the Jewish population, this is maybe the first question that people ask: how many Jews live in Luxembourg? Obviously, we don't really know, but approximately about 1,200 people. We say, like, we have in both communities about 600, and usually every second Jew is part of the organized community. So roughly 1,200 Jews living in Luxembourg. I already mentioned there are two communities. There is one in Luxembourg City, in the capital, which is nominally Orthodox, with Orthodox Rabbi, and more French-speaking and more Sephardic. And our community is more Anglophone, international, and Ashkenazi, and liberal. And between us, about 20 kilometers, but it's not only in the Jewish geography, but on the planet of Luxembourg, so to say, there are huge differences between this south region and the center in mentality. Where in the south, we're like, I don't know, we're nice, warm, and open people. People in the center, they are, I'm using these cliches, it's all about money and success and status and so on and so forth. So, and these cliches, they still exist. And of course, because we're in the South, we can use these cliches very kind of successfully, that people come to us because we are a liberal option for the Jews in Luxembourg. And anybody who is more interested in more traditional, more conservative ways of life, they go then to Luxembourg City, to the capital. My community is liberal about 10 years. So before 10 years, it was part of kind of what was one big community with two synagogues. But at a certain point, it was clear that there's no really need to have two identical Orthodox synagogues or pseudo-Orthodox synagogues. So they decided to make a change to attract more people who are not involved in Jewish life in Luxembourg, to create an alternative. And this was a good idea, and we are developing quite well. Saying that a little bit about maybe Jewish history. I'm just giving you a little bit of kind of facts and reflections, and then I open the floor for questions. Maybe you have some burning issues to discuss. Who knows? So as I said, we have two communities here, and we are theoretically, in theory, represented by one governing body, which is consistoire. Consistoire, it's a French system, was established by Napoleon because Luxembourg was part of the French Empire at that time. And this system worked until pretty recently. According to the system, for example, all clergy of recognized religious communities is paid by the state. So we are state officials. The synagogues are, well, synagogue in the city, it's a different issue, but synagogue in Esch is property of the commune, not of the Jewish community. We don't have our own cemeteries, for example. It's all municipal, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of support of this from the side of the state. And 2015, there was a change in the relationship between the state and religious organizations. The change was mostly motivated to make a more clear distinction between Catholic Church and the state, because it was not really very clear. But obviously, if you change something with Catholics, you have to change with everybody, because we are in a democratic state, and it should be equal treatment. So since then, we have a new system, but I'm still in the old system, so I'm still public official. But the next rabbi in my position would be then privately employed, and there is agreement with the state regulating how much money financial support Jewish community gets from the state to keep Jewish infrastructure and kind of a minimum amount, like it's running. So the situation now is in a way a little bit more relaxed. So we are not in such a I don't know, pressure very often what you experience in other communities, where communities have to fight for money and for membership fees and so on. So membership in our communities is in comparison to American standards is very, very cheap, let's put it this way, financially. So this is one thing. So it's this kind of aspect of being really involved in all these issues of, we're not really involved in politics, but it's we're very close to official function, let's put it this way, especially in the last 5 years. Jews live in this area, Luxembourg and surrounding area of Rhineland, since 1,700 years. This year, there are a series of cultural events celebrating Jewish presence in Germanic lands, and Luxembourg was part of this this cultural area, let's put it this way. In Luxembourg, since Luxembourg was not really very important in the Middle Ages in economical terms, Luxembourg was a very important military fortress. There were not so many Jews living here, so there were coming and going, there were expulsions and so on. But the highest level of Jewish settlement was before the war. So it's about 4,000 Jews living here. Some of them were refugees from Nazi Germany, or somebody just settled in Luxembourg before, but were not Luxembourgish citizens and run their businesses. Yeah, so this kind of those constant growth of Jewish community in the 19th century, because of the wars between Germany and France, for example, and other issues, since Luxembourg was a neutral space, some Jewish families intentionally moved to Luxembourg to escape war, and also to as everywhere to find new business opportunities. The majority of Jewish community here was mostly connected to were merchants, or some of them were bankers, but not a lot. So the majority was until recently, let's put it this way, merchants, and all people, because all people like, I don't know, doctors and lawyers and so on and so forth, they would go outside of Luxembourg to for studies, and then eventually stay there where they are, where the university was. There was no really need to go back to Luxembourg. And if talking about the most famous Luxembourgish Jews, or Jews connected to Luxembourg, there are two names. First one is Samuel Hirsch. Samuel Hirsch was the first chief rabbi of Luxembourg, who was chief rabbi here from 40s to 60s in the 19th century. And he was one of the pioneers of reform. And well, he tried his best to move this community a little bit more open and enlightened state of affairs. At a certain point, he was fed up with opposition, and moved to Philadelphia, and was rabbi then in Philadelphia. But his son, Emil Gustav Hirsch, made a really impressive career in the United States. He was a rabbi in Chicago. He was involved in creation, for example, of Union Prayer Book, and yeah, was one of the leading rabbis of the second part of the 19th century. So there is a kind of, in Luxembourg, there is certain tradition of reform, but it was in a more moderate sense than Reform Judaism in the United States or liberal Judaism in Germany, in a kind of keeping the traditional forms, but being lax in observance. There was no mikveh, for example, in the synagogue. There was an organ, and still there's organ in the synagogue in Luxembourg City, which, although it's Orthodox synagogue officially, and the rabbis who served this community were all non-Orthodox at least before the war. So there is a kind of strong let's say non-Orthodox heritage in this country. You'll be probably interested in what happened here during the Second World War, because this is one of the kind of especially these 5 years, there was done a lot in researching of the fate of the Jews of Luxembourg during the Shoah. And as I already said, there were at the beginning, at the eve of invasion of the Germans in May 1940, there were about 4,000 Jews living in Luxembourg. And at the day of invasion, about 1,800 Jews left the country. It was a very quick, organized evacuation in small groups to France and to Belgium. And then in the beginning of the German occupation, and there was a period when immigration was forced immigration especially, but immigration was stimulated, and many Jews from Luxembourg could escape. Either they were hidden in France, or they could get visas, transit visas, and visas to the new world, so to say, to Chile, to Argentina, to the United States. Some of them, some of the stories are very known and connected to the Portuguese consul general in Bordeaux. Maybe you heard this name, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, who issued transit visas through Portugal that people could go through and then end up in the United States. And that's why, for example, in Manhattan, in New York, there was, or at least is, synagogue that was founded by the Luxembourgish Jewish refugees, which is called Ramat Ora, in a way kind of translating Luxembourg into Hebrew, sorry. Lux is or light. Lux is and Burg or Berg, then it's hill, Rama, which is of course not really the meaning of the word. Luxembourg comes from Letzeburg, which means border fortress, fortress on the border, but then eventually it became Luxembourg. So it's this synagogue, Ramat Ora, still exists in Manhattan, although the majority of the congregants are not Luxembourgish Jews. Many of the Luxembourgish Jews moved back to Luxembourg after the war. I think about 2,000 people came back. About 1,220 people were in New York, on Manhattan. Exactly, I have to check the address. Yeah, so total, we estimate that about 1,220 Jews perished in the Shoah. So this is very like two words about Shoah in Luxembourg. Obviously, I mean, this was after the war. The national narrative of Luxembourg was that, I'm making very simple, that everybody was in resistance. That all Luxembourgers were anti-Nazi and they're all partisans or are resisting enrollment, for example, into the Wehrmacht, or doing all kinds of active resistance to the German rule. And this national narrative was very supported from the state and from the educational system until recently. Until recently, because because now we have a new school of there's a new generation of historians. This kind of trends we also have in Israel. We have new historians in Israel who are challenging the existing national narratives about the past. So the same thing we have here in Luxembourg. We have a couple of very active young historians who started to ask very uncomfortable questions. What exactly happened during the Second World War? What the role of Luxembourgish civil authorities in persecution of the Jews? Whether there was a collaboration, and if there was a collaboration, to which extent? So in 2015, there was an official report by a commission of historians reflecting these issues of, there was a period of time after the invasion of the Germans, between the invasion and incorporation of Luxembourg into the German Reich. There was a period of several months that Luxembourgish authorities were still in charge of the government, were occupied, but there were still Luxembourgish officials. And the question was how these people behaved towards the Jews and also the occupying force. And since we have more documents now and the archives now are more open than previously, there were documents found that showing that in certain cases, Luxembourgish authorities were even more actively collaborating with the Germans. For example, in one case, they prepared the list of Jewish pupils of the school without even being asked to do so, and so on and so forth. So there's kind of there are different elements that then made scratches on this idealistic understanding that everybody was in resistance. And since then, since 2015, there are lots of conferences and publications and Stolpersteine. And there was a monument in memory of the Shoah built and so on. There's lots of going on now in Luxembourg. 2015, when this report became public, the government and the parliament issued a statement of apology to the Jewish community. And obviously then the question apology means it's not enough just to say, I'm sorry. There were certain open questions that were still have to be, for example, about the restitution and compensations and so on and so forth, that had to be dealt with. So the government, since these 5 years, they established a special committee where representatives of all victim groups sit together and discuss issues of collective memory. So the Jews are now, so to say, the officially recognized victim group of the Second World War. There was a foundation established for the memory of the Shoah, and 2 weeks ago, government signed another agreement with the Jewish community, committing certain funds to support this this foundation annually, to support Holocaust research and all kinds of educational activities. There is also initiative of the government, supported by the government financially also and organizationally, to create an educational center in the north of Luxembourg where so-called Sammellager was during the war, where Jews were collected and pushed to the and were deported by train. And which is also important thing is that after the war, only Jews who were Luxembourgish citizens were compensated. And since the majority of the Jews living in Luxembourg before the war were not Luxembourgish citizens, they were just, you know, forgotten. And 75 years later, so to say, now there's a special commission that will deal with dormant accounts, for example, or bank accounts of the Jews that perished and were not Luxembourgish citizens, or insurance policies and so on and so forth. So all these issues that were not dealt during the 75 years will be now very complete. Yeah. So whether Luxembourg requires Holocaust education in schools, there is no really requirement, but it's becoming a part of a regular program. This year, this committee of memory for the Second World War published a book for the schools covering the time of the Second World War, because we had kind of a strange situation that Second World War was not really properly taught in the schools. So they know, so Luxembourgish schools pupils, they of course know what Second World War is, but since the country is so small, we usually use history books from Germany and from France and from Belgium. So they all know what happened in Germany and France and Belgium, but there was nothing really systematic about Luxembourg, what happened here in this country. So this gap is being now filled with all kinds of educational materials It's also one of the challenges, I think personally, is that since half of the population here does not have really historical or family connection to what's happening here, these issues are becoming a little bit more abstract. It's very difficult. Like, it's one thing then when you talk about this in Germany or in France or in Belgium, where you can have a kind of a stable population. Here, because of this mixing up and moving around, it's kind of sometimes even artificial to talk about purely Luxembourgish stories. Yeah. Questions? If the state pays for the religious leaders, what determines who is employed in those positions, length of employment, so on. We are not officially public officials. We are as if we are public officials financially. Everything else is regulated by the religious community. So, for example, they decide whether this clergy person is employed or fired, a disciplinary action, and so on. So the state is only responsible for salary and pension, and all other financial benefits that are available to the state officials, to the public servants. My future plans: I'm staying here. No. Yes, I'm staying here. There's no really.
I would like to ask you.
Yes.
Please, with the rise of anti-Semitism now in Europe and in Germany, can you tell us if there have been any incidents, and what does the government is doing something or cooperating with the Jewish community?
So let's say, well, I'm coming from Russia, so I'm coming from a very different context. And for me, personally, the level of anti-Semitism in Germany, and especially in Luxembourg, is not relatively, it's almost inexistent. But it's, again, because I know what to compare with, what I have in Germany or what I had in Russia, for example. In Luxembourg, we don't really have a huge problem with anti-Semitism, thanks God. There is certain problem with Israel-connected anti-Semitism, because we have here groups. There is a very active group of BDS, where actually for a certain period, even a Jew was a president.
Yes.
And that's some people see it as a kind of a boosting anti-Semitic rhetoric and so on, because it's all connected to Israel and so on. Luxembourg, in general, as any European country, especially Catholic country, before the war, anti-Semitism existed here. So it's not that Germans brought it here. It's, again, another myth that is now challenged. So I would say we still have reasonably good situation here and safe situation, especially if you compare what happens in France and what happens in Belgium. It's also connected to the relative wealth of Luxembourg. So if everything is fine, more or less, then there are less reasons, I don't know, to look around for conspiracy, for Jewish conspiracy especially. Yeah.
Thank you.
So does your congregation operate a religious school? Where is your birthplace? So we have a religious school, a Sunday school. Obviously now it's all Zoom for all the kids. We don't have day school in Luxembourg. Many Jews go to international schools, public international schools, where teaching is in English, which is also another interesting thing, that public education is anyway for free here, and you can also have it in English. Where is my birthplace? I was born in Dushanbe, which is capital of Tajikistan, and Tajikistan at that time was part of the Soviet Union. And my mother tongue is Russian, my mother tongue. From where in Russia? My father was in military, so we were in the north, in Republic of Komi, city of Syktyvkar, a little bit to the south of it. So Republic of Komi, it's a huge republic. Usually when people hear it, they usually think about Gulag and all kinds of camps. But this is also true, but it's on the north of the republic. We were in the south, the Republic of Komi, and then I was in St. Petersburg. So St. Petersburg. So it's very difficult to say what's going on now in Russia in Jewish circles. So we have a thriving community in Russia. There's no state-supported anti-Semitism, for example, or this kind of problems. But especially for liberal-minded people, and Reform Jews are these kind of people, it's becoming more difficult with every year to operate in Russia because of the suspicion to the Western ideas. So at this moment, everything is more or less okay, and it's running, and there are huge communities in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Many Jews who moved who immigrated, who made Aliyah to Israel, they came back to Russia. What library are you now in? So it's a virtual background. How did you become interested in rabbinic education? It was a very gradual process. When I started studying at St. Petersburg, I went to synagogue and went to yeshiva and wanted to explore more about Judaism. Let put this way, I was born in a very typical Soviet Jewish family, no religion at all. And in the 90s, we were all looking for meaning, and this how eventually I became more and more involved in the Jewish community and working for the community. And at a certain point I said, well, I'm running away, so to say, from my calling. I don't know, it's very pathetic maybe, but running away from what actually I like. And that's why I eventually ended up in Geiger. How active is Chabad in my country? So we have Beit Chabad here in Luxembourg, which is relatively not so successful as in France or in Germany, but it's becoming more and more active, especially because there's not so much going on in the Orthodox community. So people drifting from Orthodox community to Chabad. Tourism is a major industry in Luxembourg. Well, our major industry is actually more something to do with finance or space mining. Now it's another important thing that Luxembourg is becoming one of the space mining nations. And tourism is to a certain extent also developed. We have interesting castles, beautiful nature, and in the south, if you're interested in this type of tourism, there's more kind of industrial culture. Does Hebrew or Yiddish play any part in communication? You mean in the community? Well, Hebrew we use for prayer. Our service is 99% in Hebrew, because this is, so to say, the common denominator for people coming from different countries. and it's kind of easier to be together in Hebrew. Yiddish is not really a factor here. We have some people who speak Yiddish, but not really a lot. And Luxembourgish, by the way, as language, is very similar to Yiddish because it's the same subgroup of Germanic languages, Mosel-Frankish dialect. Do you have any pictures of Luxembourg or your synagogue? Well, I can show maybe some pictures of synagogue. I'm just looking if I skip anything. Yes, I mean, we can fight about how much anti-Semitism, is it more or less? There is a thesis that anti-Semitism in Austria especially is more or less stable. It's just more visible, became more visible, but there is general increase. I agree. Exactly, Ramat Torah, you have now. Is the Jewish history for students being written by Jewish historians? We have books about Luxembourg Jewish history written by Jewish historians, but not only. Luxembourg is still very known for banks, okay, from Linda. Hello, I was there several years ago and they told us that the country is now for their many banks. Is known for their many banks. Is this still true? Yes. What I remember most is that upon entering a restaurant, they collected the cell phones in the basket. This is not the case. It probably was a specific restaurant. Okay. And what's the relative distribution of Luxembourg Jews between Ashkenazi and Zifadi? So the old families of Luxembourgish Jewry, they're all Ashkenazi, coming from Rhineland and Lorraine and Alsace, because there was a lot of Jewish immigration from France, and French Jewry is mostly Sephardic nowadays. We have more and more Sephardic Jews in Luxembourg. Proportion, it's difficult to say. I think it's still majority is still Ashkenazic, but Sephardi Jews are more committed, so they're more visible in the synagogue. Let's put it this way: in the synagogue in Luxembourg City, we are more Ashkenazi. So I can show you some pictures of my synagogue, and we can wait for other questions. So
can I ask you something? You did mention that the young people, that there's not a big population of the younger generation because they live to go outside. Is it still going on now? Because what is the future of young Jews now, of children, young Jewish children? Is there any future there, or they mostly leave?
Well, the question is, how do you define future? What is important for people? Many young adults, let's put it this way, the young professionals come to Luxembourg because they're interested in promoting their career, especially if they are in financial industry. We have these guys as well. They're extremely busy, so you don't really see them very often in the synagogue, but they're here. I'm in general not a big fan of these questions, whether there is a future for this or that. I mean, it's a very dramatic question. Europe is, I still think, is great place to be, to have Jewish life as well. So we have very, let's say, it's very different type of Jewish life as you compare to New York or to Los Angeles. I don't know what's going on in Houston. I've never been there. But there are ways to be being Jewish. It's just a way to question how you, what is important for you. And we have more and more people who are intermarried. That's true. It's almost impossible to find Jewish partner in Luxembourg. But I don't think that intermarriage, I mean, you have to just accept it. It happens, and you have to work with people who are part of your community, and very often non-Jewish partners are even more active in the community. So we're trying to, or I try at least, to be with eyes open and help. Yes, the job opportunities for young Jews, as I said, if you are, depending on your profession, if it's something to do with law, if you're a French lawyer, or with finance or general business administration, then it's relatively easy to find job here. And many move to Luxembourg because of the job. Is there anyone in either the congregations interested in Jewish genealogy? My second cousin by marriage is from Luxembourg. Yes, we have people working. There are at least two gentlemen working in genealogy. If you're interested, I can connect you. And Luxembourg genealogy is very easy to organize. I still have my parents in Russia. My sister lives in Israel. I visit them not regularly. It's easier for them to come to me. So now I'm coming to the pictures of my synagogue. So this is the, do you see it? Yeah, so this is the synagogue from inside our, yeah, it's, what is more, just a sec, maybe this is from the gallery. And here you see maybe better the stained glass windows. This is the most beautiful part of our synagogue. The synagogue was built in 1954. The first synagogue of Esh was destroyed during the war. Also, the synagogue in Luxembourg City was destroyed, and this one was built after the war with the state money. Some of the for example, this parochet was saved from the first synagogue. Somebody managed to save all parochet and all, not all, but much of silver from the first synagogue, and after the war, it was returned to the community. So this is just entry, and this is from the other side of the yeah, this is our Aron HaKodesh. And this is how it looks from outside. Okay, very kind of simple structure. Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha. This is the Hebrew here. This is a synagogue in Esh. Thank you very much. And so we have our services usually on Friday night. This is the main service historically in Luxembourg. Even at the time of Samuel Hirsch, there were already problems with attending Saturday morning service. That's why he came with a creative idea of shifting Shabbat to Sunday. Didn't work. But we have also Saturday service. So the Saturday morning, And of course, all the holidays and so on and so forth. If you're interested in Synagogue of Luxembourg City. Yes, so questions? Since I'm looking for Synagogue of the City, just a sec. And bar mitzvahs and brit milah, everything. We have everything. It's a really we have the cemeteries here. We have a cemetery in Esch. The cemeteries in Luxembourg are in municipal. It's a municipal property. So there is a Jewish section at the municipal cemetery, and every Jew in Luxembourg has a right to be buried in the Jewish cemetery, and the Jewish community cannot prevent it. So if, which is great, because then no Orthodox rabbi can say, well, you're not Jewish enough or whatever. And there's also no issue of burying together the partners, Jewish and non-Jewish partners. Good. That's almost as, we're already with 1 hour, so Luxembourg Synagogue, just a second. To make it quicker, I just doing the Google. So this is how it looks from outside. Again, this was built after the war. This was the synagogue before the war, more in Byzantine style, and this is how it looks inside. Quite, again, very simple, basic, and again, this stained glass windows that you can find almost everywhere in Luxembourg. This is something very Luxembourgish in the churches and so on. Okay. Good.
Yeah, any last questions for Rabbi Grodensky until we let him go, and I guess enjoy his Sunday night over there.
Very good. Thank you so much. It was very, very interesting.
Yeah, some outstanding questions today. Thanks everyone for your participation. And before we go, I want to let you know about our next opportunity to learn about Jews around the world. And coincidentally, it's kind of a Houston-wide program. Many of you probably heard of Yom Limud, right? Which is the Jewish Day of Learning in Houston, the 27th year. This year it's virtual. This year it's Sunday, February 14th. And guess what the theme is? Jews around the world. So not only are some of the people that we've been able to present to you, like Robin Helsner and Rabbi Aryeh Reichman from the Amazon, going to be presenting these events next Sunday on Zoom. If you missed those, there's also Jews in Venezuela, Jews in India, and more. And I'm going to share a short promo video. You're going to hear from the director of Yom Limud, Marna Meyer, and also see 3 different video promos if you want to participate next Sunday, the 14th on Zoom. From there's classes all day from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So here we go.
Good morning.
Thank you so much.
I am Marna Meyer. I am the Community Events and Israel Engagement Director at the Jewish Federation of Greater Houston. I would like to invite you all to come next week to our annual Yom Limud, that's the 14th of February. Please go to the Jewish Federation of Greater Houston website. Make sure that you register in 2 different places, on the website as well as in Zoom. We have an array of classes for you to take next week from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. Please join us. If you have any questions, my email is mmeyer, M-E-Y-E-R, at houstonjewish.org, or my telephone number is 713-294-8454. I look forward to seeing you all virtually at Yom Limud next week. Thank you.
Hi, this is Rabbi Edwin Goldberg of Congregation Beth Shalom of the Woodlands. I'm very excited to be teaching at Yom Limud this year on February 14th, the history of the Jews of India. The story is historic, sweeping, inspirational, and I hope you'll join in. Take care.
Shalom, my name is Gilad Katz and I'm the Consul General of Israel to the Southwest. I am delighted to take part in the Yom Limud, which will be on the 14th of February, Sunday. It is the Valentine's Day. I'll talk about the Abraham Accords, more information, new information. Hope to see you all there. Bye. Toda.
Hi everyone, I'm Dorit. I'm excited to cook with you on Yom Limud. I'm going to teach you authentic Persian food. We're going to make June, which is chicken and pomegranate sauce and rice. And for the kids, we're going to make shawarma with Israeli couscous and pickles. All easy and fun. Can't wait to see you.
So that's kind of some outstanding learning opportunities next week. Sunday, February 14th, 9 a.m. to 4 on Zoom, organized by the Jewish Federation of Greater Houston. There's 23 courses throughout the day, hour long, and I'll be sending out an email about that tomorrow if you'd like to participate.